There are various sections within the portfolio which require practice educator and on-site supervisor to sign off. For example, the statements of confidentiality. Sections like this are self-explanatory and are not going to be referred to in their entirety. However, I would like to take you through some of the specific sections of the portfolio which are really crucial and important to you in your role, and highlight some of the key things that you need to be aware of. So we'll start with the practice learning agreement meeting. So the aim of the practice learning agreement meeting is to agree a working contract between the students, the university and the placement provider. This meeting usually takes place in advance of the placement starting and just ensures that the student is aware of what's going to be expected of them on placement. The meeting is chaired and recorded by the university tutor, so your contribution will be in the meeting and your signature at the end of the document. Some key things that you might want to be aware of in terms of preparing for the meeting will be things like the placement learning opportunities available to the students. So what's the student actually going to be doing on placement? And other things that you might want to be aware of as well are things like arrangements for the induction and arrangements for supervision, because you'll be expected to contribute towards those discussions within the meeting. And as I advised earlier, you will sign at the end of this section. The next evidence document that we'll look at is the midpoint review. So the purpose of this meeting is to review student progress within the placements. On-site supervisors and practice educators, we need to record a report for this meeting, and the report will go in section 2. So as you can see, there's a section for the students to complete their own self-assessment, a section for the practice educator to complete their midpoint report, and there's a section for the on-site supervisor to also contribute. There are suggested word counts here, but these are only a suggestion, so don't worry if you do go over. They're not to restrict or stifle your assessment of the students. This report should outline progress of the student to date. This allows the tutor to prepare for the meeting and understand what issues, if any, are present. This can support action planning for the second half of the placement. You're able to expand on any points raised within the meeting, so don't worry about providing too much detail in your report. This must be completed in advance of the meeting. A date for the midpoint review to take place will be agreed in the practice learning agreement meeting. So the third section of the report is completed by the tutor within the meeting and then is signed off by everyone at the end. Next, we'll have a look at the direct observation. So as you can see, this is a final report. There are 3 observations contained within this report. So we looked at this section earlier on. So in direct observation 1, in section 1, the boxes are grayed out as these are to be completed by the students. So you need to concern yourself with section 2 of each of the observations. Observations will be recorded by either the practice educator or the on-site supervisor. If another member of the team completes the observation, then you can record on their behalf, so further access does not need to be given. Depending on the placement, either 2 or 3 observations will need to be completed, and at least 1 should be completed before the midpoint review. So as I highlighted, as this is the final report, a final placement, sorry, there's 3 observation sections within it, whereas if this was a first placement, there would only be 2 observation sections within the report. In the first placement, at least 1 observation should be completed by the practice educator, and in the second placement, at least 2 should be completed by the practice educator. The remaining observation can be completed by either an on-site supervisor or another experienced member of the team. In the instance of another member of the team completing the observation, they should type it in a Word document and send to you to record on their behalf. The students and the observers should agree when and where the observations will take place and how each of them will be linked to the professional capability framework domains. So some points to highlight within this section, in the feedback section. So you should identify an action plan in this section here. And this is for students, so they know what areas of practice they need to develop in future. As students are not qualified social workers, there's an expectation that there will always be areas of improvement identified. We also ask that the observer obtains feedback from people with lived experience who've been involved in the observation. Record that in this section here. We appreciate that there will be times that this is not possible to gain. If this is the case, please do not leave the box empty and explain why it has not been obtainable. Now look at the critical analysis practice. So practice educators will need to ensure that a student has uploaded their critical analysis practice to PARE. So when a student comes to complete this section, they will go to this section of the portfolio, and what they will be able to do is download the actual Word document, complete the critical analysis practice, and then they will upload it. So when you come to look at it, you'll be able to click into the Word documents, download it, and view the critical analysis practice that the student has completed. Practice educators need to read and comment on this within the portfolio. So there's space within the final report, which we will look at shortly, for you to read and comment on it. There is space within the final, you are not expected to academically mark this piece of work. The role of the practice educator is more to validate its authenticity as a piece of work completed by the student during placement. Students are encouraged to send drafts to practice educators in advance of supervision and will be expected to engage in reflective discussions with you and may ask for support and guidance to assist its completion. Next, we'll look at the analysis of people with lived experience feedback. So this is another important piece of evidence for students to record. As you can see, it's greyed out because it's for the students to complete and not for you. There is space within the final report again for you to comment on this piece of work. The feedback should be separate to any feedback obtained following observations. So students have examples of questionnaires that they can use, or alternatively, they can create their own. Practice educators need to read and comment on this within the portfolio. Moving forward, there's an expectation that students are academically referencing this piece of work. So the students should be uploading the piece of feedback to this page. So you should be able to click and download and have a look at those pieces of feedback. Next, we'll have a look at the practice educator's holistic assessment. So section 1 is completed by the practice educator. This asks for an overview of the student and placement issues. Please do not leave these boxes blank. They can provide a helpful narrative to show any changes or difficulties which have arisen during placement. Section 2 is also completed by the practice educator and requires a comment on the overall judgment of the student's progress and development and capability. This is a holistic assessment of the student's progress across the duration of the placement. Within the assessment section for each domain, please provide an overview to support a judgment across the PCCF domains. Section 3 is also completed by the practice educator, and this requires comments across all of the professional capability framework domains with examples to support a judgment. So as you can see, it goes through each of the individual domains: professionalism, values and ethics, diversity, right the way through to professional leadership. Please ensure you also provide specific examples from the student's practice to support your judgment. Then within the evidence box here, all you need to do is list where the evidence can be located. For example, supervision records, critical analysis practice, or even an observation. And please make sure the final feedback page is completed as well. You're directed to comment on the service user feedback, ethical conduct of the student, critical analysis practice, as well as identifying future learning needs of the student. There is a specific section at the end of the report for on-site supervisors to complete as well. So it's your opportunity to provide an overview of the student's progress from the perspective of the placement team. So here, the practice educator would comment on the ethical conduct, the analysis of people with lived experience feedback, practice educators' comments on the critical analysis practice, and their assessment of the students' future learning needs. The students section is greyed out because it's not for you to complete, but they will also provide comments on your final assessment. The readers' comments are completed by a representative from the university once the portfolio has been completed. So just leave this section blank. The on-site supervisors' comments section is here at the very end of the report. And that is all of the key evidence documents within PARE.